Russia at the moment is essentially strategic signaling this capability again. They've done so for many years. And intelligence gathering, what Russians are saying to us right now by doing this is, we've got this capability, we've got this capability. This is a critical vulnerability of the West all round. 80% of the Northern Hemisphere's data cables go past or through Ireland. Ireland has huge data centers of Microsoft, Google and Amazon, requiring huge, vast cables of data and also electricity. And this is critical for the transatlantic link to America, carrying all our internet. And so Russia is quite frankly exploiting this vulnerability. I think it's a very sensible strategy as far as the Russians are doing exactly as they're doing today. I think it's an obvious thing to do.
A Royal Navy nuclear-powered submarine surfaced close to a Russian spy ship to warn the crew they were being watched as they loitered near Britain's vital undersea cables. That's what the Defence Secretary has revealed today. In a statement to the Commons, John Healey said he'd been forced to change the Navy's rules of engagement so British ships and boats could get close to the Yantar research vessel and better track its activity.
For the last 2 days, the Royal Navy has deployed HMS Somerset and HMS Tyne to monitor the vessel every minute through our waters. And I changed the Royal Navy's rules of engagement so that our warships can get closer and better track the Yantar. Today, I also wanted to confirm to the House that I authorised a Royal Navy submarine, strictly as a deterrent measure, to surface close to Yantar to make clear that we had been covertly monitoring its every move.
And well, Vice Admiral Jerry Kidd is a fleet commander with the Royal Navy. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Kate. Yes, I was the former fleet commander, not the current one.
Well, I was going to say, if you're a current fleet commander, then we've done very well on our bookings today. Thanks for being with us, Vice Admiral. Really appreciate it. Some people might listen to John Healey there and say that doesn't feel strong enough from the UK. These are Russian spy ships, after all. We've seen what happened in the Baltic Sea with undersea cables there being cut effectively by Russian vessels. Could we be stronger?
It's an extremely different case. A very, very good question. And it's a conundrum we've been struggling with for many years now. Let's not forget Russia has developed this capability over several decades now, starting in the mid-1970s. This falls under Russia's main Directorate of Underwater Research, which essentially is a cover program run by the Russian Ministry of Defense using submarines and special ships like the Yantar we've seen in the Irish Sea. And this capability has had a lot of blood and treasure sunk into it. The Russians are well ahead globally. They're probably the best at this capability of finding, reconnaissance, and then potentially using sabotage techniques against all our underwater critical infrastructure like pipelines and data cables. In terms of your question, how to counter this is really difficult. Very often, almost always, these Russian ships and submarines operate in international waters outside our territorial waters, number one. And number two, yes, whilst you can get closer to them and you can watch them, and you can track them, actually stopping activity actually ultimately requires a physical intervention. And that's another step. And whilst I welcome John Healey's announcement, the Royal Navy's been given slightly tougher, more robust measures they can take by getting closer, ultimately in the state of conflict, it would be physical.
Just elaborate on that. In terms of the state of conflict, it would be physical.
That's right. You'd actually have to probably take out the capability, the spy ship or the submarines, actually attack them and sink them before they go into position. And we're talking here a conflict or a fighting war. But the very minimum, you'd want the submersibles they use to attack the cables. You'd actually have to physically stop those Russian submersibles getting on top of the cable, which are laid, of course, on the seabed. They're very vulnerable and very obvious. So you'd actually have to physically stop that submersible getting on top of that cable to do some sabotage. It's as simple as that.
And so, therein would be direct action, albeit in UK waters, on a Russian ship.
Well, I think these are all questions that you can war game to death. The bottom line is that I think this is all part of currently. We're not in a state of conflict directly with Russia. NATO's not in a war with Russia. And I think Russia at the moment is essentially strategic signaling this capability again. They've done so for many years. And intelligence gathering. And what Russians are saying to us right now by doing this is, we've got this capability. You know we've got this capability. This is a critical vulnerability of the West all round. 80% of the Northern Hemisphere's data cables go past or through Ireland. Ireland has huge data centers of Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, requiring huge, vast cables of data and also electricity. And this is critical for the transatlantic link to America, carrying all our internet. And so Russia is quite frankly exploiting this vulnerability. I think it's a very sensible strategy as far as the Russians might be doing exactly as they're doing today. I think it's an obvious thing to do. So I think we'll see more of this. I think we'll see the Russians continue to do this as part of their, if you like, their strategy of inconvenience. We know they're running amok across Europe in terms of cyber attacks and arson. And this is another way, quite frankly, to needle the West and buy up time and assets and worry.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a waste of resource, but there is obviously a bigger war game, if you like, going on there. We know that the UK activated Nordic Warden. It's an advanced AI system. It's new to help monitor the Russian shadow fleet. Do you know much about this Nordic Warden?
I'm not in close, obviously, within the detail of it, but it's essentially the ability, trying to build up what we call the picture, so we can track and monitor Russian activity. Of course, a bit like the Chinese, it's not just about using warships and submarines that are part of the armed forces. The Russians now are using a very large number of shadow fleet operators, fishing vessels, merchant vessels, and so forth. And of course, we saw in the S-Link attack between Finland and Estonia, the power cable between those two countries was damaged in December last year by a ship that was registered in Hong Kong, a Chinese operated ship, dragging its anchor across that cable. And of course, that presents another conundrum for a defending nation, is how do you tackle a non-combatant ship if there's a conflict. So these are really tricky issues, but primarily we need to understand what's happening in our waters with good surveillance, good tracking, so we can make the right judgments at the right time to try and protect our critical national infrastructure, which essentially are what these cables are.
Yeah. Look, thanks so much for speaking to us. Vice Admiral Jerry Kidd, former fleet commander with the Royal Navy. Good to have your expertise across that.